Hello everyone, good afternoon or good evening whenever you're watching this video. Today I want to talk about Ted Chiang's The Great Silence. I want to talk about the themes in this story, especially the story's treatment of communication, extinction, silence, humanity, and listening. Now, the first time you read this story, it seems to be about the Fermi paradox. If intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe, why have we not heard from it? But the story quickly turns that question back to Earth. The central irony here is that human beings search the universe for intelligent voices, but fail to listen to the non human intelligence already living beside them. In this case, in the story, the narrator is a Puerto Rican parrot, an endangered species living near the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. The story's core idea is that humans have built an ear capable of listening across the cosmos, yet they ignore the voices of creatures in their own backyards and forests. This irony gives the story much of its philosophical force. The Fermi paradox asks, if you've heard of it before, if the universe is so vast and if intelligent life should be so common, then where is everybody? Why is the universe silent? In Ted Chiang's story, however, the silence is not only related to astronomical questions, but also to questions surrounding our ecology, our environment. The parrot suggests that humans themselves create silence by driving other species toward extinction. In The Great Silence, then, this is not the mysterious quiet of our outer space. It's the silence that follows when a forest loses its voices. Extinction becomes a form of muting, the disappearance not only of bodies, but of calls, behaviors, relationships, rituals, and the world. This is where the story connects powerfully to the philosophical problem of anthropocentrism, the assumption that human beings are above nature and can fairly dictate values and meaning. Western philosophy itself has constructed humanity by supposed uniqueness, reason, language, self awareness, moral judgment. Aristotle himself described human beings as rational animals, and we've been taught since Descartes that thoughts are at the core of our being. In both traditions, the human mind becomes the standard by which other forms of life are judged. Chiang challenges this hierarchy, this system of ranking beings on Earth, by giving narrative authority to a parrot. The very structure of the story asks us to suspend our assumptions that only humans can be meaningful speakers. The parrot matters because point of view is not just a literary technique here, it's an ethical intervention. By allowing a non human creature to narrate, to tell the story, Chiang forces us to confront the limitations of how humans listen. The parrot is not presented simply as an object of pity or conservation. It's a thinker, an observer, and a critic. It understands human aspiration, but it also sees human blindness. This reversal is crucial here because humans usually study animals, classify animals, and decide whether animals are intelligent enough to matter. But in this story, the parrot studies us. That way, the gaze is returned. The theme of communication deepens this critique in the story. It emphasizes that humans and parrots share a rare ability of learning to vocalize, learning to use our voices in ways. Both can intentionally learn, both parrots and humans, and produce new sounds. This is a biological fact that becomes a philosophical metaphor in the story. Speech is not only a tool for transmitting information, it's a sign of identity, of relationality, of relationships, and presence. The parrot's question is pretty simple. If humans long to encounter a non human intelligence, looking into space, why do we not recognize one already capable of responding to them? This connects to a long philosophical tradition which speech is tied to being. Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. Chang's parrot implicitly revises this into something like, I speak, therefore I am. But this revision is not only linguistic, it suggests that existence becomes meaningful through relationships. To speak is to call out. To call out is to assume that someone might answer. Communication is therefore an act of hope. Every voice implies a listener. The story also draws on older mythic and religious traditions that treat sound as sacred. You may know of some of these. Many cultures imagine creation itself as sonic, the spoken word, the divine vibration, the gyrations of primordial sound, to put it a few ways. I point to examples such as the Hindu Om, maybe Pentecostal glossolalia, big word there, and Pythagorean ideas of cosmic harmony. Chang places parrot speech here within its wider human history of sacred sound. This is important because it prevents us from seeing parrot vocalization as mere mimicry. Instead, the story invites us to think of sound as a mode of world making. A species' call is not just a noise, it's a part of how that species inhabits reality. This leads us to the story's most haunting idea, extinction as silence. When a species disappears, what is lost is not only biological diversity. What's lost is a way of sounding, a way of perceiving and relating to the world. The forest becomes quieter, but so does existence itself. In this sense, extinction is not death multiplied across a population. It's the erasure of meaning. Here, Chang's story recalls Rachel Carson's The Silent Spring, whose title imagines ecological catastrophe through the absence of bird song. Silence becomes evidence of harm. But Chang adds a cosmic dimension. The silence of extinct species on Earth mirrors the silence humans fear in the universe. Perhaps the terrifying thought here is not that there are no other voices out there. Perhaps the most terrifying thought for us is that intelligent beings repeatedly fail to hear one another until it's too late. The parrot's perspective also complicates the question of human guilt in the story. It doesn't portray humans as cartoon villains. You know this from the story. In fact, one of the most subtle claims in the story is that destruction can happen through negligence, rather than a sort of active hatred. Humans may not intend to destroy the parrots, they just fail to pay attention. This distinction matters ethically, because if harm can occur through ignorance, then responsibility can't be limited to what we just deliberately choose. We are also responsible for what we ignore. A lot of philosophical traditions teach this as well. And as I say, that idea has philosophical roots. In moral thought, from ancient ethics to modern environmental philosophy, to Aristotle's ethics about what kind of character we cultivate through habits. If we habitually fail to notice the living world, then our moral character is diminished. Most recent environmental ethics challenges the idea that only human interests matter. Chang's story participates in this tradition, this critique, by suggesting that listening is not simply a scientific fact, it's an ethical practice. The final emotional force of the story comes through its reference to Alex, the famous African gray parrot in the story, whose final words to his researcher were, "You be good, I love you." I describe this moment as both evidence of connection and a tragic missed opportunity in the story. Whether we interpret Alex's words as scientific proof of non-human intelligence, or as a symbolic pathos, an emotional release, Chang uses these two to reframe the entire story. Humanity claims to want a message from another intelligence, but perhaps such a message has already arrived. Perhaps it did not come from the stars, but from a bird. Now that ending is powerful because it's both hopeful and devastating. It's hopeful because communication across species is possible. There can be recognition, There can be affection. If you have dogs or cats, you may know this easily. There can be response. But it is devastating because the recognition often comes too late, or almost too late. The message has the structure of a farewell. The story's elegiac tone makes it feel at last to address to humanity, a final attempt to be heard before silence takes over. So what does the Great Silence ultimately say about humanity, about us? It doesn't reject human curiosity, this looking for species in the stars. Chang doesn't mock the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. In fact, the story admires the grandeur of that search. The problem is not that humans look upward. The problem is that we fail to look around. Their cosmic longing becomes morally incomplete when it's detached from earthly responsibility, humans that is. The story, therefore, asks us to redefine intelligence. Intelligence is not only technological achievement. It's not only radio telescopes or mathematics or even machine learning tools. Instead, intelligence may also be the capacity to listen, to recognize another being as meaningful, and to change one's behavior in response. And by that standard, the question is not only whether parrots are intelligent enough for human beings to notice, the question is whether humans are intelligent enough to listen. In the end, the Great Silence, this story, transforms the Fermi paradox into an ethical mirror. We ask, where is everybody? But the parrot asks in return, who have you failed to hear? And that's the story's deepest challenge. It suggests that silence is not always empty. Sometimes silence is produced. Sometimes silence is the afterlife of neglect. And sometimes before the world goes quiet, it speaks. The task for humanity then, the story I believe says, is not only to send messages into space, but it's to become worthy listeners here on Earth. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the story. I'll see you in the discussion.